In this video, I'm breaking down the differences between the PMBOK Guide 7th edition versus the 6th edition. If you want my entire cheat sheet of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition to master the most important concepts, you can download it completely for free at alvinthepm.com/PM7. So the PMBOK Guide has evolved over the past several years to recognize how the landscape in project management has adapted and grown. And don't forget, it's also one of our responsibilities as project managers to stay in touch with the latest trends, tools, and new ways of working. One of the biggest changes that PMI reports is a stronger focus on outcomes instead of only on the deliverables itself. As the world continues to evolve, we're seeing that more and more teams are working remotely from anywhere in the world and in different roles and capacities. Previously, there was a huge emphasis on process-based definitions, ITTOs, and making it very prescriptive in nature, meaning perform X, Y, and Z processes in the following steps to lead a project. And that was the biggest emphasis in the original PMBOK Guide 6th edition. You would have dozens of process groups under each of the 10 different knowledge areas for managing a project. I'll show a few examples on the screen right here. Now, however, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition has evolved to reflect how value and outcomes are delivered, and it bases this approach on what's called guiding principles to achieve those results. In other words, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition no longer dictates to you what step-by-step process must be followed, what tools must be used, and in what sequence. Instead, the 7th edition recommends overarching principles that can help you achieve your desired outcomes regardless of what industry and what role you're in. It's meant to be completely universal and applicable across the entire spectrum for managing projects. So this shift towards a group of principles gives us a high-level view of how we should lead our teams using the 12 project management principles, which I'll show on the screen right here. It's worth mentioning that the latest PMBOK Guide 7th edition does not obsolete or negate the previous information from the 6th edition. I personally think that this is one of the biggest misconceptions among our project management community. The process-based approach is still valid and still relevant to manage projects. It's just not the focus in the latest PMBOK Guide 7th edition. At least that's how I've interpreted it based on my reading it from cover to cover. And the reason why I say that is on page 170 of the 7th edition, underneath the section for process groups, it states the following: process management processes can be organized into logical groupings of project management inputs, tools, and techniques. And it even references the 5 process groups of initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and controlling, and closing. The other big change that the 7th edition introduces is the system for how value is delivered to organizations with projects. And this is covered specifically in the second chapter of the Standard of Project Management from pages 7 to 11. Projects don't just deliver an outcome, they also deliver value to your organization. So instead of focusing on the how to manage projects, programs, and the overarching portfolio, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition shifts the focus towards the entire value delivery chain that's responsible for your organization's strategy and business goals. This change here explains why the 7th edition no longer focuses on the 12 different knowledge areas, ranging from integration, scope, procurement, and quality, and instead focuses on what's called 8 different performance domains of stakeholders, team, development approach, planning, work, delivery, measurement, and uncertainty. You want to think of a performance domain as a group of similar activities that you should perform if you want to successfully achieve your project's goals. Each domain interacts with each other simultaneously, and they do not take place without each other. So think of each performance domain connected to each other as a continuous cycle where each domain feeds off of each other. So instead of adhering to a specific process, it's all about how can you achieve your desired outcomes by tailoring your processes, your plans, and the artifacts that you're using. The other biggest change in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is that there is an entire chapter that explains how to tailor your project given your organization and the context you work in. I recommend checking out chapter 3 of the PMBOK Guide for more detail. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that the 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide focused very heavily on explaining different tools and techniques as they're tied to each process group. Now, the 7th edition does this in a similar way with a dedicated chapter solely on this. However, it gives you a high-level overview of different models, methods, and artifacts that you can use and explains the purpose of each one, although at a superficial level. And as I've mentioned previously, it does not prescribe and it does not dictate to you how or when each tool should be used. So again, you're going to have to reference outside material if you want a deeper dive into using each method or artifact. So as you've probably already guessed it by now, yeah, there were a lot of changes in the latest PMBOK Guide 7th edition. To make sure you're set up for success, watch this video next because it's my entire free course covering all the chapters of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, and I'll see you in the next video.